topic in UBC and see so many friends here. It's also wonderful. So I will just begin by showing you the photo that's on the cover of my book. I really like this photo. It's actually now reside in Stanford University, and it really captures, I think, the spectacular moment at the theaters for many of the people who were nearby, not only just Chinese, but also other people that happen to wander into it that are non-Cantonese speaking. All right, so again, I'm going to show you something, quite a bit of stuff on the slide. I will give you the next one just to also begin my talk. Whoops, not that one. So let's see. Technology is great, isn't it, if you know how to use it? Okay, here it is. So here are San Francisco Chronicle on the cover page of one of the performers that came in 1922. And here's a Toronto Star, and this was a performance there as well in 1922, around that same time. And this is, again, San Francisco Chronicle that featured quite prominently in its cover page, the performance of Cantonese opera. So yes, you can see in the 1920s and 30s, a large number of famous Cantonese opera performers set out to expand their performance career across the Pacific, though the significance of this journey was not obvious to anyone. As the most international genre of Chinese opera, Cantonese opera has always traveled far. And here I show a map of Southeast Asia. Since 19th century, Cantonese opera troupes were all already performing along the network of commerce all through the Southeast Asia. So you can see in Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore, and such. They have also followed the footsteps of laborers and merchants in the Trans-Pacific migration to North America, as well as Australia since the mid-19th centuries. So when Chinese immigrants took part in the westward expansion and nation building of countries such as Canada and the United States, Cantonese opera troupe followed their steps and was part of it. Okay. Yet the 1920s wave of Cantonese opera performers, which is the topic today, who arrived at the shore of North America was unprecedented. They were stars, many of the best in the profession. So in next one, I will show you a few of these stars. Let's see. Actually, that's not what I'm looking for. Looking for this one. So this first one is, her name is Li Xuefang. She's the most revered female singer of the era and generally considered Cantonese opera's counterpart to Peking opera's Mei Lan Fang. And the next one is Bai Jurong. He's one of the several top male singers of the scholarly role types. And the next one is Xiao Dingxiang. He was a highly respected female impersonator, and his voice was considered to be extraordinary. And it also includes several performers like this. He's Xinzhu, so he plays the traditional role of Guangong quite a bit. And here is Mu Dansu. She's a female impersonator, male impersonator at times, and leading female roles as well. So in other words, she was a character that can play multiple roles. And you can imagine they make use of that talent on stage, right? Have her transform from one to next. So in addition to these ones I show, there's also many other ones, some of which are really famous by mid 20th century, like Ma Shizheng was one of the biggest star, and Guan Dexing, who's not only an opera star, but also actually Kung Fu movie star. So there's a lot of them that were active in North American theaters and later become really famous. So these actors and actresses travel to North America only from 1 to 3 years, and that's the limitation that the immigration office allowed them. And their presence gave rise to a vibrancy of Cantonese opera performance in many Chinese community. I realized I cut out the part about immigration, but the gist of the story was that for 20 years or so, for 12 years or so, there weren't any Chinese theaters in the United States because of immigration. And in Canada, it continued to have, Chinese theaters, but then it was not as lively until United States started to allow theater to come in, and that's 1922. So that's why the reason that I study, that is in the 1920s, there's just abundance of them, and as you will see. So I want to show you through several things the ways in which they're lively. So the first one is newspaper. You see this newspaper, each cities have quite a few newspapers, and they have advertisement like this, showing every night for its performance. Yes, they perform every night, different repertoire. And this is the playbill they publish every day, circulated all through the community. These are the 2 theaters in San Francisco. And these are the photographs that are shown in the salon, and as well as circulated through public domain, public space. And these are the stage photos. This is another stage photo. You couldn't get more grand than this, right? So it's pretty crazy, as you can see. So the opulence and splendor of the stage production was significant both in the communities and beyond. Many featured classic opera, like this one. This is a more classic. You can see this straightly period. The background is not that classic. The background is supposed to be like, just a curtain. But because the stage become much more elaborate, it has also a different painting. But what you can see is that the performers are wearing traditional, so minus the background is pretty traditional. The next one, however, is different. This top one on the right, you can see almost looks like a movie, isn't it? Right? And that's not a traditional stage in Cantonese opera. It was really very much influenced by movie. In fact, the top portion here will show, light project from behind and show figure showing up, the person that she's thinking about, of course, right? So that's a montage, that's a movie style. In this bottom one, you can see the different character, you can see this guy is not Chinese costume, is it? And it's together with these guys. I don't quite know what story this was, but obviously there was a lot of imagination that go into it. All right, so the modern influence as well as the classic tradition are both in presence during that time. And so at this time, the majority of the singers travel throughout the States, Canada, and Cuba. And crossing the border is one way for them to keep their immigration status alive, which is a practice that even till today, right? If you're an immigrant in this country, you need to extend your visa, you go outside the country and you come back. So that was even the things that was happening at that time. And you can see that from here, Toronto, Montreal, and New York City are all part of the network. Havana is tremendous. It's as active as it was as active as Vancouver and San Francisco. So this large network is remarkable considering how hard it was to travel during that time, right? So railroad was the important part, and steamship. And sitting here in Vancouver, I'm just so excited because Vancouver is a place that allowed the theater to go back to North America because it didn't have Chinese exclusion for the longest time. And then when United States had Chinese exclusion, performers can go from Vancouver to Seattle much more easily through the steamship, and it's a lot cheaper. It's the whole story is complicated and very interesting, but I'm really excited because I didn't step on Vancouver even once during the time I was writing this book, which was 15 years. And so now finally I'm here and I'm telling the story of this place. So it's really fun in that way. Okay, so these are the theaters in the United States. They're altogether as many as, I guess, 7 of them. And you can see I grouped them by particular unit. This first one actually goes through all these different names and transformation, but they're actually, at the end, Great China Theater. And this is Mandarin Theater. It didn't go through transformation. It starts as Mandarin Theater and continues to be that. And this is Lao Ting Cao. This is one theater that actually, moved several places, and so on and so forth. But I might add, because we're in Canada, the first group, and the third group, and the fourth group, they're all from Canada. They all started in Vancouver and have a life in the United States, and that's how important it is. But I show this to really nail down a particular point, and that is, collectively, these theaters create a vibrant culture. And here's a narrative, I think, really gives a sense of what the performers was thinking about. Guan Yinlian was one of the performers during that time. She's quite loved. And she has a granddaughter who took down some of the things that her grandmother told her. And this is phenomenal, I think, narrative about the importance of the opera performance for those performers during that time, because we don't often hear from them what they think about it, right? So this kind of confirms some of the things I gather from studying their playbills. They're elaborate, they're innovative, they're different every night, and the popular repertoire come back, 4 or 5 weeks, and they're just really remarkably diligent on their work. And this goes to show a classical opera, and on the left are stories that have passed on from the 17th century in all sorts of Chinese opera. And Cantonese opera has its own rendition. And on the right-hand side are the operas that were produced in the 20th century, most through the demand of the city theaters. So it has a different character to them. Okay, again, since I'm in Canada, I'm overly excited. This is from City Archive of Vancouver. It is from 1918. And this is a box office receipt. And it shows you how many people were there getting what kind of a ticket. So I'll show you what this is. So this is the title of the opera. Gee, can I move here? Doesn't show. Okay. So I guess I have to, oops, and bump this. So this is the title of the opera. This is the day of the week. And these are the numbers of the tickets they sold. So these are 319 tickets they sold in that first class. In the second class, they sold 350. So altogether, 669. How's my math, right? Okay, so that's how much they sold that night. And then the total they sold that night was, let me see, what's this? I think it's 100, I should know this, right? I think it's $132.25. Okay, so that's how much they sold. And this is a good night, because as you will see, I'm obsessed with this particular opera, 智士林吉他. It's one of the classical, and it's beautiful. And so, that is a little bit of a detour to show. And during this time, there's a lot of phonograph records. And it's really interesting because in 1927 is when the phonograph record exploded. It was so much production, and in 1920s already, they're already in like a newspaper, and this is a particular company that sponsored by Hong Kong and the North American merchant. And these are the records that they produce. This is deceiving, This is a Chinese newspaper in Canada. It's called Chinese Times and 大汉公报. And this little thing is actually half of the page. So it's actually this big. So that's a huge advertisement, as you can see. And these, they sold at that time by catalog. So this is the first catalog of this particular Oriental record company. And these are all the numbers it has. So one thing that I think is very important is that Cantonese opera experience for that time was not one-dimensional. They are not confined by the theater as well. So with this kind of various technology and medium, the experience is really multivalent, and they include the stories, they include visual images, music, song, lyrics, characters, the roles, and the moral principles. They're all part of the enjoyment of the theaters. And the mediums are also varied. They're print, they're record, they're live performance. So these operas permeated through the Chinese community and had indelible impact on their social memory. The sonority, image, and story continue in various forms even to today. So next I'm going to talk about a little bit of obstacles. Why then do we not know about this glorious performance history of 1920s in North American Chinatowns? Many obstacles prevented this history from being told. And I've talked about several in my book, but I will discuss 3 additional ones here. The first is conceptual, one limited by the nationalistic views. The history of Cantonese opera has been primarily concerned with its development in South China and Hong Kong, leaving the development of the network of Southeast Asia and North America as secondary and insignificant. This view regards Cantonese opera performance overseas voyage and performance as a detour from their primary career in China. So an important part of this conceptual model is that it completely overlooked the significance of a trans-Pacific history. Let me unpack that a little bit. On the one hand, Cantonese opera performance was much influenced by the history of imperial colonial forces in cities of Hong Kong, Guangzhou, and Shanghai. So already they are taking on this trans-Pacific influence. And on the other hand, the movement of Cantonese opera across the Pacific also engendered reciprocal circulation and influences. So many of the North American practices were actually very influential for the later development of Cantonese opera. So the trans-Pacific perspective is crucial to the understanding of this opera history. The second obstacle resulted from the volatile situation surrounding these Chinatown theaters. There were dramatic changes to Cantonese opera fashion in the 1910s and the subsequent decades. However, it was the shift of practice and trends in Cantonese opera of the 1970s that eventually shaped the Cantonese opera as we know them today. And therefore, you can imagine from that vantage point, the 1920s styles appear old-fashioned, transient, or even fleeting. So we are only now starting to understand the performance practice and significance of that era. The third obstacle is the ephemeral nature of opera performance at the North American theater. In hastily creating opera performance at a volatile time, the theaters and performers were not able to create tangible text of its performance. They often use the 提纲戏 style, which is to perform from the outline of a plot. And my book talks about a huge chart they would put up in the backstage, indicating both the formulaic, ways of performance and the plot and sequence and what should be put on stage and so on and so forth. So while the theaters were driven to compete or elevate their performance level or innovation to secure the audiences, their practice dissipated into oblivion or simply exist as anecdote. All products that were used to facilitate the elevation of performance disappear into obscurity and gather dust, and perhaps the exception of gorgeous costume, which we have plenty of in the Museum of Anthropology. The best collection in the world, actually. Because of the aim of these performances were the audience's subjective response, the result was the styles and trends of performance went out of fashion as easily as clothes or change of sentiments. For these reasons, the ephemeral performances, though significant during their time, left limited and not always decipherable traces. To reconstruct the performance practice and to understand how it might invoke reciprocal relationship between the theater and the community, thus requires reconceptualization. In particular, this is a reconceptualization that places Chinatown community in the historiography of Cantonese opera. Okay.